Hey everybody, Dave here and welcome back to the channel, and today I'm going to show you how to make clear ice. Now clear ice is one of those things that'll help elevate your cocktail, and it's really easy to make at home. One of the best things about clear ice is that it's denser than regular ice, so it doesn't melt as quickly or water your drink down. And there's less impurities in clear ice, so a lot of people think that it tastes better. And honestly, clear ice just looks cool, so why not? If you're new to the channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you want more Drinks with Dave. And now, let's go make some clear ice. Okay, so obviously when it comes to making clear ice, the first step is gonna be freezing your water. You're gonna wanna pick water that's as clean and as pure as possible. Now, some people say that you might wanna get distilled water or even boil the water, but honestly, the water that you're drinking is probably good enough. In fact, I just use regular old tap water and I run it through a Brita filter, and it's given me perfectly clear ice every time. Now, as far as freezing the ice, we're really trying to achieve one thing, and that's something called directional freezing. And ideally what we want is for our water to freeze from the top down. And the way that we're gonna achieve this is by using one of these. And this is just a normal travel cooler. These things are pretty much everywhere, they're cheap, and they come in all different shapes and sizes. And essentially, we're just gonna be freezing our water inside of this. But the first thing that you wanna do is, most of these have a lid, so we're just gonna take the lid off. And after we do, basically what we have is a giant ice cube tray. And the way that this works is, this is insulated, so it's going to slow the freezing process down. And since we took the lid off the top, when we fill it with water, it's going to allow it to be colder on top and insulated down below. And this is going to help with our directional freezing. So we're gonna get a nice layer of clear ice up above, and it's going to force the impurities down and out. Now make sure that before you use this, you give it a nice scrub down and make sure it's clean. But essentially, all we have to do is fill it with water. So let's just do that. This is ready to go in the freezer. But before we put it in the freezer, we need to talk about temperature. You see, clear ice is best formed at around 0 degrees Fahrenheit. If you try to freeze it at a colder temperature, your ice is gonna form a little too fast and it's gonna leave you with cracks and bubbles, and we're not gonna get the clear ice that we're looking for. Now when it comes to how long we're gonna freeze this for, I like to freeze my cooler for about 30 to 36 hours. It really just depends on the size of the cooler. Smaller cooler, less time in the freezer. But what's important to consider is we're not really trying to freeze this all the way. We want that ice layer to form at the top and for those impurities to settle in the water below. So this can be a little bit of a trial and error process, but eventually you'll figure out like what works for you and the size of the cooler that you're using. Anyway, let's go ahead and get this into the freezer. Okay, so it's been about 34 hours since I put the cooler in the icebox, and it is frozen just the way we want it to be. Now the only thing we have to do is get this ice out of the cooler. And this gets a little bit messy, so I like to do it over a sink, and we'll just wait for the ice and gravity to do its thing. The ice should start to slide out, and you'll hear it, and when that happens, we're just gonna lift the cooler up. What you'll notice is that underneath you have a nice slab of thick ice, and then on top is a shell that's still filled with water that hasn't frozen. All we need to do is break that down, get that water out, and cut it down into a slab that we can work with to make our cubes. And the way that I like to do that is just to use a serrated knife. So we'll just take the serrated knife and start hacking away until we have a slab that we can work with. The first thing I like to do is poke a hole into it to just let the water come out, and then I just work around it. This is the really messy part. Once you get a good chunk of it off there, I like to set it up on its side and just sort of saw off the edges. And if you've done this right, you end up with a nice big slab of perfectly clear ice. Okay, so looks like we did a pretty good job here. It's completely clear, but it's obviously too big to put into a cocktail glass. So we need to process it and turn it into cubes. And I'm gonna show you how to do that. But first, let's just head back to the bar. Okay, so we've got our slab of ice here and we're ready to start breaking it down. Now, I went ahead and laid a towel out and got myself a cutting board. I feel like this is the best way for me to work with it. The towel just prevents it from getting too wet all around me. And don't worry about the ice melting a little bit when you're working with it. It's not going anywhere, trust me. Now, as far as tools go, we only really need two things to get the job done here. The first is the serrated knife that we used earlier to break this down into the slab. This is just an old bread knife that I've had for like 20 years, and now I like to use it to cut ice. And the second tool that I'm going to be using is some form of mallet or hammer. I'm just using a simple meat tenderizer, and this works perfectly fine for me. To actually cut the ice, we're going to be using the serrated knife, and we're going to score the ice. So what I like to do is I like to find a distance from the edge that will match with the size of the cube that I'm trying to make. And we're just going to place the knife on the ice and then just start to saw until we get a nice groove line. It goes a couple of millimeters in. You don't have to apply a lot of pressure here. You just want to make sure that you get the groove to go across the entire plane of ice. And you'll know it's done when you have a nice straight line that goes across the entire plane of the ice. Now basically the goal is to get this line to go all the way around the ice. And so what I like to do is just flip the ice up on its side. I'll put my knife in at an angle and then I'll slowly rotate it as I saw it. And then I flip it back down, and then I do the same thing across the larger side of the ice. So I start with the corner and then I rotate it down as I saw. And then we'll flip it back up on its side, and we'll do the same thing we did on the other side, just to complete the line all the way around. What it should look like is the line should go all the way around the ice. There should just be a tracer line that goes all the way around, a few millimeters deep. Next, in order to get this piece of ice broken off, what we want to do is take the blade, place it into our groove, and we're going to use our mallet to just simply tap up and down the length of the blade. And if we do this right, we should just get a perfect long piece of ice that cleaves off. After a few soft taps, I like to tap it a little bit harder. Okay, so I've got my long piece cleaved off. It's not exactly perfect, but I'm going to show you how to cut this further down into cubes. And basically we're just going to use the same technique to cut this down into smaller pieces. So I'll just take my knife, figure out the size of the cube I want, and then I'll start sawing away. And as you can see, we've got the line that goes all the way across it. And just like we did with the first slab, we will just place our knife in the groove. And there you go. And there you go. Now we've got a nice, clear ice cube. And we'll just repeat the process one more time. And that's it. Just off that slab, we've got 3 very large cubes to work with here. Whoops. And we'll just set those into a bowl. They're fairly oversized, and sometimes a cube won't fit into a glass properly. You can basically work around the edges of the ice and shave it down until it fits into your glass. Be careful though, because ice is slippery and the knife is sharp, so you really want to make sure that you're careful when you're sawing at these. And it fits. And that's it. You can just sort of customize your ice lumps to whatever glass you have. After you've got your ice cubes made, I've only got the 3 here, but let's say you have a large bowl. You might be tempted to just throw them into a bag and put them into the freezer. But the issue is that they are fairly wet because we've been working with them. If you put them into a bag right now, they will just all stick together, and then you run the risk of having issues when you try and pull them out later. What I recommend is just taking the ice individually, freezing them by themselves, and then once they're not so wet, put them into a bag and they can be stored for. All right, that is the episode on clear ice, and I hope that you learned something. And if you haven't used clear ice in a cocktail before or made it at home, that you give it a shot, because I really think it does make a difference in cocktails. And it looks cool. So until next time, cheers.